Okay, today we're going to talk about big data. Okay, what is big data? Can you think of any situations that you benefited from big data, or you were exposed to the services created through big data analysis? Okay. Cookies. Are you talking about the files that the companies put on, websites? Okay. So how? How do they? How was that involved with the big data?
Every time, for example, in Google, the most searched stuff.
Okay.
You search for.
All right.
It gets a general idea of what you want, and then every time you type something, it shows what you usually search for.
Okay. Is that due to big data, or is it due to cookies? What are cookies? Cookies are the files that the company website places in your computer to mark your computer as, to mark you as somebody who has visited their site. And sometimes cookies have the information about the session that, or the information that you input, you gave to the website in the previous session. So sometimes when you come back to the same site, when you try to log in, they'll already present you with your login name and password. That's made possible by a cookie. Now, what he's talking about is, for instance, if I start typing something like see, if I put somebody's name, sorry, this is in Korean. Okay, all right. This is a close friend of our current president. Okay. See, if I put Hillary Clinton's name, Google immediately gives you suggestions of longer phrases, longer search word, longer phrases made up of search words. So Hillary Clinton, young Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. And this is very, very simple big data analysis. Analysis of all the search words that other Google users, other Google search engine users have used in, I don't know, past few days. So this is very simple. But there's a more involved process. Let's say you go to Amazon.com, right? And you go in there to order a book. Now, a lot of times, let's say I order a book on artificial intelligence, so machine learning, I guess, is the most popular book. Now, Amazon.com is showing, what was the most popular title associated with search word search word artificial intelligence. This is a very, very easy big data analysis because it just has to look at the database they have of what books have been ordered or searched. And when you order a book, it will show you, what other books were bought together, right? And also what other books if not bought together, but bought by the same user. So it gives you suggestions. This is also some kind of a simple use of big data because Amazon.com draws this knowledge, makes these suggestions based on tons, thousands of millions of orders, book orders, and views, page views made by other Amazon.com users. But there's something even more sophisticated. For instance, let's say I enter my profession as a law professor, and I enter my age and my school, right? Now, what Amazon.com will do is look at my profession, and look at my age, and look at my gender, and then can make suggestions of books for me to order. They do that by aggregating and generalizing from the data about many other Amazon.com users who have similar profession, gender, age, and regional background as I do. That is a little more sophisticated use of big data. And there are even more big data, right? So governments, now they are doing crime prevention using big data. They take out a map of the city, right? And then overlay the geographical map with the income distribution, ethnic distribution, and zoning information, right? Commercial zone versus residential zone, parks, recreational zone. And then they can predict where and what type of crimes will happen in next week or two. So they'll send more police force over there to be ready for the crimes taking place. Have you seen a movie that reminds you of something like this? Does it ring a bell? Have you heard about a scenario like this? Sending a police force somewhere before a crime takes place? You guys must be really young. All right. Yes, Minority Report by Tom Cruise. The title, Minority Report, it doesn't show much. All right, too bad. Minority Report, the term Minority Report comes from the fact that these predictions are made by three prescient entities. It's not clear whether they are actually human beings or robots, but there are three beings who can take in all that data about the present world and give specific predictions, not just about where, but by whom the crime will be committed. So the three people usually give unanimous predictions. The three beings give unanimous, but there are times that two beings pinpoint someone as likely criminal, but a third being gives a minority report, dissenting from the majority. So the tension in the movie is what should Tom Cruise do when there is a dissension, there is a dissenting opinion from that prediction. But that is how far big data is being used. Also, banks and financial institutions. In the past, they asked for a lot of information from you before they lend you money. Now, these days, I don't know whether you are all exposed to this advertisement, but if you watch Korean TV, you will see lots of advertisements made by banks claiming to deposit you, claiming to make you loan so fast so that the money will be deposited in your account before you hang up the phone on your first call to the bank. How do they do that? Well, they use big data. They have made so many loans and have processed so many loans that only upon the basis of your age, gender, your last name, your address, they can predict how creditworthy you are and make loans according to that assessment. That is also big data analysis. What else? Your map application, right? Some of the map applications depend on your use of that application. So you look for a itinerary from place A to B, and then you actually make the travel, right? Now, sometimes it takes more than the time initially projected by the map application, sometimes less. Now, that data becomes the result of an experiment that is accumulated in the company's database. So the company continually updates the time taken and the best itinerary from from point A to point B. So if enough people use the map application, they can get a very good predictive model on how much it takes for you to travel from A to B and what the best route is between A and B. So doing so requires combining of different databases. So it requires variety, okay? And also it requires very fast processing of the data. So it requires velocity, okay? I mean, if Amazon.com takes a day to make a suggestion about what books might interest you, they lose me as a customer. Once I open the web page, they should be able to give me my suggestions right away, right? Takes velocity. Okay? And also, finally, the analysis will be meaningful only in proportion to the volume of the data that is processed, right? If I make a generalization based on 3 entries, that's not big data. If I make a generalization based on 1,000,000 entries, then it can be a meaningful prediction. So volume, velocity, variety are like 3 V's, the elements of big data. Who do you think makes the best prediction about where influenza outbreak will be this winter or next week or like tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? You think so, right? Ministry of Health will have, all the scientific knowledge available to make the prediction. But it is actually Google search engine. What they do is they look at what search words come in through the search engine. And let's say I get sick, or I'm about to get sick. What do? I go on Google search and look for the best, medication for the newest flu. So the more people, if there is a current or pending influenza outbreak in the certain region, the number of Google searches for influenza in that region will increase, right? So based on that data, Google makes a prediction, and that is supposed to be very accurate, and that's again a interesting use of big data. So there, the Google will have to overlay the keywords data, right? What search words have been entered by the users with geographic locations of the users, right? Then, by combining the variety of the information of the voluminous content, voluminous size, and by processing it very quickly at velocity, they can make the prediction. So, big data can give you a lot of knowledge that we didn't, or you didn't have access to in the past. There's one more example. This department store Target, they surprised people by informing the parents of teenagers, or at least giving predictions to the parents of teenagers about whether their teenage daughters were pregnant or not, even before they told them, right? Target could make the prediction based on the things that the teenage customers bought at the department store. And their predictions were pretty accurate. So you can see how valuable big data analysis can be for the companies, because they can shape their products, they can shape their marketing strategies, they can even pinpoint who are likely customers and focus their marketing strategy toward them. Right? Now, what ethical issues arise from big data? That is the topic of today's class. So, give me a second. Okay, so this example of target. If you are the teenager, if you are the daughter who is pregnant, how does it feel about the target knowing, the department store knowing about your pregnancy before even your parents? Will that be breach of your privacy? What if, for instance, not department store, but to avoid being found out about your pregnancy by target, let's say you used, smaller shops of different brands. But what if those shops, 7-Eleven, GS24, or is it 25? What if they aggregate their data so that they together find out your medical conditions? How do you feel about that? Would you feel that that is violation of privacy? I mean, it's not an easy question. Let's say you go to a certain restaurant in your neighborhood, and you go there so often that the restaurant owner knows what you like. So you can go there and can just say, user, my user order, please. You don't have to say anything, right? The fact that the restaurant owner knows what your favorite menu item is that violation of your privacy? Okay. How about the shops? How about, the small shops sharing data about you, right? Your purchase records, so that the shops together can figure out my medical condition or, my other living conditions. Is that violation of privacy? Okay, what's the difference between the two scenarios?
One is something that you don't care even if you expose. But the other thing is you care when it gets exposed.
Well, what if, so one is about what you eat, the other is about your medical condition. So if it's several restaurants, and if the restaurants aggregate their data about what I ordered, that would be okay?
For me, it's okay.
Okay. All right. Any other opinion? Exactly, right? I mean, when you make an order at a restaurant, you have to give that information, right? To make that order, you have to let the owner know what you are ordering. That's what ordering is about, right? But when you purchase something from a shop, the other shop owners don't have to know what I ordered from shop A, right? If I go to shop B, the owner of the second shop doesn't have to know what I ordered from the first shop, right? To give me the purchase that I wanted to make. So it was unnecessary sharing of the information. So when and because of that, people's expectations is that if I buy something from shop A, the information stays with the shop A. And if that information leaves, the relationship between you and the shop A, people will feel that there is a privacy breach. So what law is there to protect you from this type of privacy violation? What law is there to protect you from unauthorized sharing of the data that you gave to the government or a company that received the data from you in exchange for the goods and services they are provisioning? What law is there? Or what ethical principle is there to protect you from this type of privacy violation? Yes? Protection of private information. That would be a good name to a law that protects private information. But there is a more popular term for that. Yes, data protection law, right? And in some countries, it became a law. In other countries, it's still an ethical principle, right? Data protection law assumes that, or data protection principle assumes that you are the owner of the data about you, right? So that you are the owner of something means that even if you lose it, right, other people, when they find it, cannot use it the way they like. They have to come and receive my consent before using it for their purposes, right? So the burden is on the user of the data. If the data is not about them, okay, if the data is not theirs, then they have to come back to the owner of the data, which is you, to use for any purpose that has not been consented to, or to share it with anybody, any third party that has not been consented to. Right? That is data protection law. And we through the previous lectures, we talked about how data protection law can be abused if it's applied to the publicly available information about people, right? If it's abused, I can control or I can prevent you from, saying bad things about me, for instance, right? I can say, hey, K.S. Park, Professor K.S. Park, that information is mine, it's about me, it's mine, so, when you use that data in a statement, for example, like, K.S. Park is a bad teacher, that statement you cannot make because you are using data about me, right? That will be the abusive example. That will be the example of how data protection law can be abused when it is applied to personal data that has been made publicly available. But the fact that you ordered certain food from a restaurant, the fact that you ordered certain book from a shop, the fact that you bought something from a department store, or the fact that you bought a six-pack of beer from a local convenience store, is that publicly available information? No. Is it something that you expect other people to easily find out? No, not at all. Right? So this is the area where data protection law applies without any hesitation. Okay? Medical records, personal behavioral records. Right? Now, then there is this clash between big data. There is this conflict between big data and data protection law, because big data always requires combination of different databases. Okay? Now, let's say I went to a library and made borrowed some books. So there is that information. There is a library record. And then let's say I went to hospital and got treatment from some diseases. So there is a health records, right? Now, some big data analysis will try to combine the library records with the health records, to research on, I don't know, maybe like the relations between people's, learning level versus, health conditions. Maybe people who read more, maybe the researcher wants to find out whether people who read more are healthier than the people who read less. Is that valuable information? Maybe, right? Let's say someone wants to do research on that and will want to overlay the two databases on top of each other. Now, in order to do that, put you in the shoes of the library user or the hospital patient. When you go seek a treatment or diagnosis at a hospital, you expect and you fill out a form, right? You answer the questions that the doctor poses to you. And when you give that information to the doctor and hospital, you expect that information to be used only for diagnosis and treatment, right? You don't expect that information to be shared with others. It's not publicly available information. When you go to a library, yes, you have to give your personal data in borrowing a book. You also expect that information, the information you just gave to the library, to remain with the library and not be owned, right? But the big data researcher wants to overlay these two databases on top of each other, and he will be using it beyond the purpose that I have consented to, right? By merging the two data, right, the researcher is using it for the purpose that I never consented to. So violating my right as the owner of that data. So big data industry, or whoever wants to do big data, is ultimately bound to collide with the rules and principles of data protection. So what do? What can you do? So the compromise between this clash between big data and data protection is anonymization, right? So separate the parts of the data from the database so that people don't know, right? So it cannot be known about whom the data entry is, right? Once a person is segregated from the data entry, so for instance, if the data says A has borrowed book X, Y, and Z, anonymization will require taking out person A, right? So there's a blank, and it goes, has borrowed book X, Y, and Z, right? Now, if that information is given away by your library, would you feel that that is violation of privacy? No, right? Because it's no longer about you. Yes, it is about you, but you are the only person who knows, right, that book X, Y, Z have been borrowed by you, because other people will not, in that data entry, will not be able to figure out whether it is you who has made those rentals. So that is the technique called anonymization. And once data is anonymized, once the personal data is anonymized, it's no longer protected by data protection law. So it can be freely used. So Amazon.com, yes, they have a database with all the names and attributes. So for instance, by name KS Park, it has a list of books that I have borrowed. I have bought from Amazon.com. Machine learning, robotic ethics, speed of light, brief history of time, Wuthering Heights. But once they take out my names, once they take out my name and the names of the users who made those purchases, even if that database is given away to third parties or given for some crazy purposes that Amazon.com may have in their minds, it doesn't violate my privacy because it's not about me. It's no longer about me. So that is the technique called anonymization, and that is frequently used for big data research. But that's not the end of the story, and there is this ethical question that you should all think about. Well, there are two ethical questions. One is, ironically, even if your names are taken off from these databases, there are ways that the companies can track down who the data entry is about. If they use, ironically, using big data analysis, they can track you down. Let's say in the Amazon.com database, let's say they took out my name, right? But they left my age, and they left the place of my employment, right? And then there are the titles of the books that I ordered. If they have using other information, other publicly available information, they can somehow figure out that it is about me, K.S. Park. Okay? And this has happened several times. For instance, Netflix has disclosed a huge database about, people living in certain places have ordered these movies and have watched these movies on Netflix. And they made disclosure after quote unquote anonymizing the data. They took out the name, took out the address, took out credit card records, took out any email addresses entered to create the Netflix account. They left only the zip code and the age, gender, and possibly profession. But some people who have no relation with Netflix could analyze the data and uniquely pinpoint whose movie rental record each entry was about. They could figure out 85% of people who were in that database. So yes, it takes huge amount of efforts. It takes, we are talking about how to allow big data, right? How to allow big data research without violating data protection law. But using big data, people could, track down whose data this is about. So when that is made possible, how generous shall we be about using and sharing of anonymized or, quote unquote anonymized data about us when it is scientifically possible, although remotely possible, although it's possible only with huge efforts, if it is still possible, shall we let data about ourselves be used by third parties or used for unknown purposes because of that remote possibility? Shall we just say, oh, okay, it is anonymized, so other people can use it for whatever purpose they want? Yes, some mad scientist may be able to figure out that it's about me, but who cares? There's just so much value that science and civilization can draw from the use of anonymized data. So, we should not interfere with that. Should that be the approach? Or shall we say, hey, if it's remotely possible that somebody out there can figure out who this data entry is about, then maybe, even if it's anonymized, should not be shared with third party, should not be used for unknown purpose without my consent. The easy answer will be, or the easy sounding answer will be, hey, anonymized or not, get the consent. Right? It's my book rental record, it's my video rental record, it's my restaurant menu order records. Even if you take out the identifier, even if you take out the name, that's still mine. So if you're going to share it with third party or use for some unknown purpose other than giving me food, book, or video, you better get my consent. That will be an easy answer, but easy to say, but very difficult to implement. Amazon.com has visits of billions each year. Getting the consent from billion people will require a company bigger than Amazon itself. And how you're going to get consent from those many people who are especially anonymous? We talked about anonymity in Tuesday class. And you know how the Constitution protects anonymity. So many of the users remain anonymous. How do you contact them and get their consent? For instance, Facebook. Facebook has a lot of information in their database about people's political orientation, religious propensities, sexual orientation, you name it. So there's in few years down the road, Facebook will be the richest company, not by stock prices, but the data that they own about people. They will love to take out the identifiers of all the data, meaning take out the name, take out the address, take out the schools and the place of employment that you entered in creating the account, and use the quote-unquote anonymized data. I keep saying quote-unquote because if it's anonymized, it should be impossible to track back the data subjects. But as I said, it's really difficult to create truly anonymized data set because ironically, because of the big data technology out there, even anonymous data sets can be re-identified, meaning tracked down to the data subjects. So that's why I keep saying quote-unquote anonymized, right? Or so-called anonymized. So what shall we do about this? So on one hand, there is this need to expand the reservoir of human knowledge using the data about ourselves. Big data can be used for good purposes, saving people's lives, advancing science, making better use of natural and artificial resources. But for that to happen, we have to, for that to happen, we have to look at the other side of the equation, or the other side of the balance, which is, people's privacy. People will know, when people know that the data can be somehow tracked back to them, if there is even a remote possibility, should that be allowed? Should that possibility kill the room for using the data for an unknown purpose or sharing with a third party? Or is that just too restrictive an attitude toward use of data? What do you think about TA? 민주? 로그인 좀 해주세요. Okay, we'll get to those questions later. So there is that one ethical question. And the other question is this. So big data requires collating or overlaying two or more different databases with each other. Now, there is, if they want to make the data useful, the entries in one database will have to be matched with the entries in the other database of the same person, right? If the entries are not matched, the data will be meaningless. Because, when think about the researcher doing the relationship between, people's learning level and, health condition. Only if a person A's library book rental record is matched to the same person's health condition records, only then the aggregated database will be meaningful for the research. Yes? Now, for that to happen, if the databases are anonymized so that person A's entry on the surface doesn't show any sign that it's about person A, right? Then that record in the, for instance, library database cannot be matched to the entry in the health records database if it's truly anonymized, right? Then big data is impossible. So the only way that you can get out of this conundrum is this. Replace the names or other identifiers in the library records with some code number, right? Some 10-digit serial number. And then go to the health records database and replace all the names and identifiers with, again, with the same 10-digit serial number. And then put together the health record and book record with the same serial number, right? Match those two entries together. Because if the same, right, if the same rule applies, if the same serial number is given to the person of the same identifier or name, then the two entries should be about one person, right? Now, some people believe that that's not privacy violation. Other people believe that that is still privacy violation, even if it's not about me. Even if researcher cannot find out that the aggregated book renter and health record data is about me, right? Even if the researcher cannot find that out, that's still privacy violation, because even if the connection between me and the health record is severed, it is still mine. And then if you add my library record to the health record, although the resulting combined data does not have my sign, does not have my symbol, does not have my name, still there is a privacy violation because data about me is merged with other set of data about me. So this linking of personal data, should that be considered a privacy violation? So those are two ethical questions. The first question, where full anonymization is made very difficult, ironically, by the big data technology, shall we still allow sharing and using of, sharing for unknown purpose, sharing with unknown third parties? Shall we allow using and sharing, such use and share of anonymized data, quote unquote anonymized data about us? That's the first ethical. The second ethical question is, shall we allow data about us to be merged with other data about us, as long as the resulting merged data doesn't show any sign that it is about us? What do you think about those two questions? Right, maybe we can do show of hands. When anonymity is very difficult to achieve, now, if you okay. There are different techniques of making data anonymous. And there are different ways of measuring anonymity of data. So if you look at the postings, if you look at the articles posted, you'll be able to tell, you'll be able to learn what those technologies are. Now, so using all those technologies can increase the anonymity of data significantly, so that only a handful of people in the whole world be able to de-anonymize that data, meaning track down the data subjects that the data is about. So given anonymity is really difficult to achieve, shall we allow this quasi-semi-anonymized data sets to be used and shared outside our consent for the advancement of science, for expanding our knowledge about nature and us? If you agree, raise your hands. Okay. How many of you disagree? If there is a remote possibility of re-identification, if there is a remote possibility of de-anonymization, then the data should never be given away. Raise your hands. Oh, okay, you are evenly split. All right, that is the ethical debate going on right now. You are at the cutting edge of ethical discussion. How about the second question about linkability? All right? If the two data sets about you are linked by someone who doesn't know, who that data entry is about, right? So it doesn't know that these two data entries are about you, but somehow know that it is the same person. If that third person merges the two data sets about you, without that person knowing that it's about you, is that privacy violation? If you think it is, raise your hands. If you think not, raise your hands. Okay, good. Again, that is the cutting-edge ethical question going on right now. All right, any other question, comment? If not, we'll go through these questions. Is Netflix big data, or Netflix does make suggestions, does change ordering of the movies that you see when you go into their site. So there is a big data used. Yes, here Google using our search history. Google used our search history to select what ads to be shown on our search page. Okay, on your unique search page, right? Each person's unique search page. If Google does that without getting your consent, that will be privacy violation. But when you use Google, when you get Google account, you will be asked to click yes to their terms and conditions. And if you read it, you will find the clause that says your search history will be used for advertising purposes. So through that, they did obtain a consent. Now, you'll be surprised that the same clause says the content of your emails will also be used for advertising purposes. So when you write an email to your friend, private email, let's go have a bulgogi, Google will attach to that email the advertisement of bulgogi restaurants in Seoul, so that when your friend receives it, he will see the advertisement together with your message. It will be privacy violation if Google didn't get consent, but there is a clause in the terms and conditions that authorize Google to do that. Hyun-sun, you answered my question. Well, Young-woo, yes, this is what we talked about. Anonymization is the technique to get around the data protection problem. Eunbi, yes, it's unrealistic to think of something as clearly private or clearly public. So what data protection law does is, forget about it, all data is owned by the data subjects. Actually, that's what data protection law says. But as I said, if even publicly available information is protected by data protection law, it will severely handicap flow of information that's needed for keeping democracy alive, keeping market economy alive, right? So publicly, even if the data protection law says it applies to all data, the exceptions have to be marked out, where publicly available information will not be censored by data protection law. So how about the data that's in the middle, right? Like what Eunbi just said, this address book pictures, GPS, the things that we are not sure about, they are protected by data protection law. They should be protected by data protection. That's the whole purpose of creating data protection law. If you don't know whether it is public or private, it will be protected. If it's clearly public, like K.S. Park, Professor Law, Korea University Law, that's not protected. Right? So public becomes an exception. Everything else becomes protected under data protection law. Sayan, thank you. This answers some of the questions raised earlier. Yebin, this is a good point that yes, when you get Google, when you get a Gmail account, you have to sign up, but when you do search, you don't sign up. Well, if you don't sign up, Google will not use your search history in pushing ads toward you. So if you just come up, say, if I just do a Google search on this computer right now, Google doesn't know that it's me doing the search. So if I come back next day and do search, my search history today will not be reflected in the advertisement shown to me tomorrow, because Google doesn't know that I'm in front of this computer. So don't worry about that. I'm talking about when you are signed on searching and you are signed on looking at advertisement. Only when you are signed on in both occasions, Google will have made use of your search history for pushing advertisements towards you. Okay? All right, thank you, and see you next week.